Anyone who reads Alisa Childers' book should read your book.
Okay.
You said I was giving you an ad hominem by saying that you were emotional. I don't know if I used the word emotional on it. I was doing something very different, Randall. I am reading your book thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to completely trigger all the people you need to convince.
Well, let me ask this. So, at the end of the day, in your conversation with Cameron, again, I'm an insecure, thin-skinned author, but I also want to learn more about how I can improve my arguments. So, at the end of the day, at the end of your conversation, you didn't endorse the book I had written, but
Well,
you
no,
did
to be
endorse.
clear, I think people should, anyone who reads Alyssa Childers' book should read your book.
Okay.
You said I was giving you an ad hominem by saying that you were emotional. I don't know if I used the word emotional on it. I was doing something very different, Randall. I am reading your book thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to completely trigger all the people you need to convince what you're saying here. And I'll give you some examples of that. And this is not as careful of a case as it could be. You have a much stronger case to make, like a much stronger case to make that doesn't trigger the people you need to convince. And what I was trying to explain is uh, to give an account for that that would help people take to kind of look past those issues to really get to the heart of what you were saying. That's what I was trying to do. So it's exact opposite of ad hominem. And ad hominem is me saying, look, he's emotional, so don't listen to him. What I was doing is very different. Is like, look, he has a reason to be upset. Both him and a lot of his friends are being called heretics when maybe they're not. So uh, a lot of his case isn't as precise as it could be. So look past that as you read it and get to the core part of what he's saying. And his core point is correct that, that progressive Christians are Christians too.
So you said two things that I triggered people that I was supposed to be reaching, which
Well, I'm
suggests,
predicting you will, and when I read it.
yeah, okay, which so that what I would want is and you also said I'm not precise, so I would say, okay, please be precise in how I wasn't precise, and give me examples of how I inappropriately triggered people where I could have communicated in a different way without
Well,
triggering them.
so this is so. But to be clear, getting back to what I was saying before, is I do think that Alyssa was wrong to say it's not Christianity or it's not Christians, and that's just too high of a statement. But progressive Christians have presented themselves as presenting a revision of historical Christianity. They presented themselves as presenting a different Christianity, and that's not necessarily anything worse than creating a new denomination. I'm not saying it is that organized, but that's how they present themselves. And I think also there are dangers in their approach that they took. Now, you might disagree with that, but that's what I think, okay? And that's what Alyssa thinks. And I think if that's how she'd framed her book, it would be far better. Now, in what you wrote, I just have to say that if with that far more reduced thesis, some of the things you do, if with a person is working that far more reduced thesis in their mind, like me, some of the stuff you did really reinforces that idea. So a great example of this is how you talked about, early on in your book, you talk about Pannenberg and the virgin birth, and you talk about I forgot the name of the guy, but NT writes,
Marcus Borg.
Marcus Ford. Now to be clear, let me tell you the positive part. I agree with what you're saying. Is like you are actually reading these guys. You're informed. You're handling them in a humane way. All right, okay. And and this is actually what helped me understand the core thing that you're really after. You're really wanting a sort of humanizing treatment across disagreement, and that's to your credit. Look, I mean, even if a person doesn't agree with the resurrection, calling them a heretic to start out with probably isn't the best way to do this. I mean, I think the right way to do it is to engage them how N.T. Wright has handled it, right? And if a person is a place of rejecting the virgin birth and affirming the resurrection like Pannenberg is, the right response isn't to call them a heretic, is to actually read what they're saying and engage with them enough, which is what you're doing. Okay, so this is all really good, right? But But at the same token, is that it's also true that they're outside the boundaries of historical Christianity in a lot of ways. I mean, Pannenberg is maybe a debatable case. I think the fact that he's neo-Orthodox is an important context as well. Um, and so, but there's really no sense of that other side of it, of like, hey, there is an important reason to talk about what historical Christianity is. These people are outside of historical Christianity in important ways, or at the borders of it, at least in the case Pannenberg. I know that he has an argument for why he's actually affirming the Apostles' Creed by completely redefining the meaning of the virgin birth. But I mean, like, without having any concern about that really raises a lot of red flags. Like, you don't
Okay, but
really give
that's
a
actually not
case for his
true.
claim.
So look on page 14, after this, so I introduced Marcus Borg. Okay, I mean the context, just to back up, on page 13, so I'm going through the way Alisa Childers described the pastor who triggered her, and so this progressive pastor who triggered her like 15 years ago and shook her faith, right? And one of the things she says that he said was, quote, "The resurrection probably happened, but you don't have to believe in it." So I said, I'm going through each one of her summations of this fellow's teaching and showing how there's evidence that she's interpreting him and presenting him in an uncharitable and tendentious fashion. And so this is one of those examples. So then I give the example of Marcus Borg, who was a liberal Christian and struggled with the doctrine of the resurrection for at least a couple different reasons, including his panentheistic theology. And Wright talks about this because Wright was close friends with him and says he would still call him a Christian even though he rejects the resurrection. And nobody understands the resurrection from a historical, perhaps as well a theological point of view as N.T. Wright. So here's, after I introduce that, I say this: let's start by restating the obvious. The resurrection is a central dogma of Christianity that is not in question. So I am fully in tune with and highlighting the fact that Borg is outside of historic orthodoxy, and that would constitute a heresy, I think, by historic definition of Christian faith. That doesn't change the fact that we can still try to understand what he's doing charitably when she just does not.
Well, this is, I think, I'm just telling you the way that's written. Look, I'm reading you in a very friendly way, Randall. I got a lot of people reaching out to me after the Capturing Christianity interview. I was encouraging them, if they've read Elisa's book, to read yours as well too. Okay, and I would generally tell them there's going to be parts that will probably bother you, but this is what you should look past to get what he's saying here. I'm telling you, this is one of the parts. The way how you wrote it, you could have made your point a lot clearer. Um, I mean, I wish that you had an opportunity to have people like me read it. I mean, ahead of time and help you, because like the way how you do it there, it's just not clear where you stand. So I think part of it is that you're saying her central thesis is that progressive Christians are not Christians, but that's at best one half of her thesis. Her other thesis, which I think uh, you haven't given much attention to,
But I mean, on
and it
Borg,
hurts you. I'm telling you, it hurts your case. Is that what we should be returning to is historical Christianity?